Let me spend some time sharing tips for giving feedback. I am Cecilia Gorman. I'm the creator of Manager Bootcamp. I help managers of all levels feel more equipped to communicate with, motivate, and lead their teams. Have you ever had a tough conversation? Yes, right, all of us. And they're called tough conversations for a reason. They're tough. Nobody likes getting into sticky topics where there might be something difficult to talk about, especially when it's someone we have to work with every day. And why do we hate them so much? Because they can be awkward and sticky and stilted and highly uncomfortable. And last I checked, we humans, we like comfort. Listen, we all fear conflict and confrontation. A stressful situation, it wreaks havoc on our brains. Conflict and the stress that comes with it raises our stress hormones, which incites our rational thinking brain to shut down and trigger that fight or flight response. If the threat, in this case, a tough conversation before us, is perceived to be too big, our emotional brain hijacks the situation and compromises our ability to have a clear and rational conversation. That's when we either become aggressive or defensive, or we attack or withdraw, or at the bare minimum, forget what we wanted to say. And for humans who like what's comfortable, we don't like this one bit. We hate conflict. We fear the unknown. We fear the other person's reaction. They might get angry or cry or yell, or worse, they might be resentful, or the absolute worst, they might go silent. Well, guess what? Having tough conversations is an important part of being a manager. Friends, it takes courage to be a manager. It takes guts to confront a performance problem. And frankly, this is what we're paying managers for, to put on their big kid panties and to help solve some of the issues that no one's talking about. Usually, we spend most of our time saying, I absolutely do not want to have this conversation. I absolutely do not want to have this conversation. We put off tough conversations because we don't know what to say. Maybe we have a hard time pinpointing the real issue. We procrastinate. We hold out for what might be a better time. Or my favorite, and I'm really good at this, I wait to see if the problem just might take care of itself. For a lot of folks, they might just be so nervous to talk about it that they dive right into it and butcher up the whole conversation. So it's time to shift the lens on tough conversations and begin to look at difficult situations as an opportunity for growth. Growth for the person receiving the feedback, and growth for you as a manager learning how to better deliver it. In any feedback conversation, there's a giver, which if you're a manager, it's most likely going to be you, and a receiver, your employee or the person on the receiving end of this conversation. So to start out, there are a few things you should know as the giver of feedback. Number one, you're probably going to be a little uncomfortable. We just shared that most humans do not like being in a state of stress and will do anything to avoid conflict and confrontation. So any person who's slated to give feedback often starts out to some degree uncomfortable. Next, givers of feedback, they aren't perfect. I mean, who is? It's not like we've all given 10,000 hours of feedback and can call ourselves experts. No, we only get the opportunity to improve how we give feedback when we get the chance to give feedback. Once a day, once a week, and not very often. So no wonder you aren't perfect. Give yourself a little bit of grace as you learn how to get better at giving feedback. And as they say, when you know better, you do better. So let me get into the tips for givers of feedback. Number one, be kind. And this is the golden rule. We learned the golden rule in kindergarten because it's so easy. Treat other people the way you would want to be treated, especially true when you're in a feedback conversation. Be kind when you speak in person. Be kind when you're on the phone or over text and email. Managing is a human-to-human dynamic, and kindness lays the groundwork for everything. Number two, keep the end in mind. The goal is to develop employees to their greatest potential, period. By keeping the end in mind, you're keeping the employee's growth and development and potential right there in the crosshairs. It gets you out of the drama and the personal attachment to the issue at hand. Feedback conversations are always about growing the person, so keep that in mind when you start. Tip number 3 is have a gentle lead-in. A gentle lead-in is something that I call is that very first sentence out of your mouth. We want it to be gentle. We want it to be objective. So your approach to the conversation with that very first sentence sets the stage for the entire conversation. If your first sentence is aggressive, is confrontational, is accusing, the employee immediately goes on the defense, and it'll be difficult to have a productive conversation. Be gentle with your very first words. Number 4, take responsibility. What this means is sometimes a manager has a role in the situation at hand. What role did you play? Did you know nothing about the situation and therefore you were ignorant to what was going on? Were you unclear the last time this came up and maybe you didn't set the expectation and hold the person accountable as you should have? Did you not follow up or investigate when you had an inkling of the situation going on? Oftentimes a manager has a role in the tough conversation and they need to take responsibility for it. The 5th tip for givers of feedback is to really listen. Listen with your ears, of course, but listen with your eyes as well. There's the conversation at hand, and then there's a second conversation going on, which is what their body language is telling you. Did they just stiffen up? Did they cross their arms? Did they purse their lips and furrow their brow? Really listening in a feedback conversation, it tunes you into the real dynamic that's going on. Somebody's silence is very telling. Did they stop talking suddenly? Are they maybe thinking and digesting about it? Are they angry and defensive? You've really got to pay attention to the whole conversation that's going on in front of you. The next tip for givers of feedback is something that I call the backpack. As a giver of feedback, I want you to remember the backpack. And here's what this means. Every person in the workplace comes into work and they've got a backpack on their back. The thing is, though, it's invisible, so you can't see it. I've got one on, you've got one on, our whole entire team has one on, and we're all coming into work each day with this backpack on. And what's inside of that backpack is all the real life stuff that goes on in their personal life. Maybe their mom just got diagnosed with cancer. Maybe their son just got expelled from school, or they got another note from the IRS. All these tough, real things that go on in our personal lives that a lot of times people at work have no idea. And we carry the stress and the burden of those things into work with us each day. So in a feedback conversation, something that you say that might not have scale or gravity to it might be that last straw that brings someone to their knees. So people might have more going on in their lives that you don't know. And really what this is a call for in remembering the backpack is just to have a little bit of grace with people. Sometimes the response you get back isn't entirely about the situation at hand. Be gentle with people, give them grace and space, and do your best to understand that we're all humans trying to do our best in the workplace. The next tip for giving feedback is to allow space for silence. When we get in a tough conversation and we're at all anxious or nervous about it, our inclination is to finish the conversation as fast as possible. I just want to tell you this thing and then I want to be done. And what that means is a lot of times is we don't give the space to take a breath. We've got to let the person in front of us digest what they're hearing and process the conversation at hand. Did we just tell them that they were put on a performance plan? Did we just let them know they were being released from their job? We have to let them marinate and digest the words that they just heard. Nervousness wants to fill in that white space. So resist the urge to be talking the whole time. Give some space for silence. It doesn't take a lot to be better at giving feedback, but it does take something. You've got to be intentional about learning the dynamics of a one-on-one conversation, especially when it gets a bit stressful. By paying attention to these tips and by incorporating them in every feedback conversation you have, you will get better, I promise.